We have Vũ Hoàng, David Huang, and Kat Lee. And from Fanti, we have Andy Nguyen from Florida. Again, we'll take questions from the audience. And Eric will be helping me. If you raise your hand, Eric will take the mic down to you. In the meantime, let me ask just a generic question to both of the filmmakers. Either film can go first. What prompts you to make the movie the way you made it?
I guess it's more like what's my inspiration, but back when I was in the early 90s when my family came here, I remember my parents used to pass around newspapers and just kind of give us, a roof over our heads and food, and I used to go with them, and I was wondering like the kind of interesting story I could make out of, those childhood memories and like the immigrant experience. And then it kind of turned this whole thing where when I was coming up with this story for a writing class, I was supposed to be a son's last call to his mother. So originally I kind of wrote it where it was just words on a page. But then I was like, this is actually my chance to really make more of a Vietnamese exploration and about the experience. And then I started thinking about my mom and then my family, and then it kind of then I added the flashbacks, and it started becoming what it is on the screen.
Why did I make it the way I made it? I think I'm asking that question to myself every day. I don't know. For me, I finished making the movie maybe like 2 years ago, and watching it now, I probably haven't seen it for like 9 months, So I don't know, why did I make it why I made it? For me, looking at it, I feel like I couldn't have made it any other way. I'm always haunted by my parents' expectations of me. It feels like Viet Film Fest, that's like really rings through a lot of other films. But to tell it this way, I just wanted to make a movie that was fun, that was playful, but also at the same time is like juxtaposed with the tone of what's happening to you and kind of wondering why things are the way they are. That's kind of how I feel about my relationship sometimes with my parents, You don't get an explanation sometimes, and you're kind of retroactively trying to understand, why did they have that greater intention for me? I always see my parents are kind of like the director of my life, and I'm just sometimes this piece that is just trying to make them proud, So I feel like, I don't know, I feel like that's the way I made it, because I'm haunted by those expectations.
Yes, the theme that I guess everyone here sees the most that is in parallel with both films is the parents-children relationship. What do you see in your own experience and in other people that you have spoken to about the Vietnamese cultural expectation from both the parents and the children, and how should we deal with those?
I don't know how we do it. I saw Elizabeth's film yesterday that also explores it in a different way. But having to make this film, I kind of have to understand both sides, We don't know what's right, and I think communication sometimes is a difficult thing between the younger generation and the older generation, and our way of displaying love is not in the same way that we see in American culture. We don't really explain why we do things. Sometimes it's done without any dialogue, it's done without any explanation. Sorry, what was the question again? I feel like I sidetracked.
How did you deal with those expectations that are expected from of both the parents and of the children?
I moved to Vietnam 9 years ago to try and make a movie, which we saw here now. And a part of like moving there and just trying to, I had no idea what kind of film I wanted to make until I got there. And when I got there, I spent a lot of time just talking to a lot of young Vietnamese people. And I wanted to make a movie specifically for them. And education works a little different in Vietnam, because when you're about 17 or 18, they all compete to get into universities, and have to decide who they want to be at the age of 18, and most of them have not a clue what they want to be. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the beauty of the American education system. We can just dabble in many different things before we decide ultimately what you want to major in or what you want as a career. But for a lot of young Vietnamese people, they're truly haunted by these expectations because they're smart enough to get into these schools, but as soon as they get into the schools and they do well in the program, like halfway through, they kind of abandon it and they don't go to class anymore. They just wake up every day pretending they're going to university, when in fact they're just figuring out what is the shortcut that I can, and then I break the news to my parents when I have some kind of a success. But a lot of them get involved in drugs, they meet, wrong people, and there's this very dark period of time where you're living a lie. You're living a lie to the people that you love the most. And sometimes that is their expression of, I'm lying to you because I'm protecting you because I love you. And I think that's a complicated nature to a lot of things in our culture. But how do we deal with it? I don't know. I think it's still a question. The film for me at the end, at least I tried, is to show a certain kind of unconditional love. Even if it's a little dark, even if we as a family have to bury the body together, if we think about it, and I'm also inspired by real life Vietnamese narratives like Jennifer Pan. I don't know, they did a documentary on her. And I always think about I think Western media was like, how can a child kill their mother? I don't think about that often, but because for this film I did, And I always think about those expectations, like what drove her to do that. Her father, I don't know if people know the narrative, she hired someone to kill her parents. Her mother was killed, but her father lived, survived. And got to see what her daughter was behind. And I tried to think about what pushes someone to do that? Why don't you just move out? Doesn't that make more sense? But I think Vietnamese people kind of get a sense, about these expectations of, your parents will follow you no matter where you are, a lot of people have those expectations that push them to do, I don't know, drastic things.
We do speak of the Vietnamese culture, but I would think that it's actually Vietnamese cultures, because we have these Vietnamese-Americans in the Pan's family, Vietnamese-Canadian. But in the newspapers, we have that. I think there's a code that is difficult growing up here. Is that correct? Could you please elaborate?
Yeah, I think, especially in the early 90s, especially with gang culture in general, I think it's also inspired by people I know in my life. And I think when you first come here, especially I think in the early 90s, there's a huge population of Vietnamese coming here, immigrating here. And I don't think we were really accepted during that time by other cultures and other races. And I think that people try to find a family outside of their own family because our parents, I think it's a common thing that our parents are working so hard that they're not really around as much. And then you try to find a family outside your own. Similar to kind of New Wave where they're having their own New Wave thing, there's also gay culture and just trying to find friends and stuff like that. And then, what was the question again? I kind of got sidetracked also.
The Vietnamese-American culture, yes.
Yeah, I also think as we're growing up as immigrants, I think there's also this identity that you're trying to find because you're not really, there's being Vietnamese and there's also being American and there's Vietnamese-American, what is Vietnamese-American? And I feel like that could be different to all of us in a sense, but that's almost its own thing too. And then I think in the early years, we're trying to find out what that is. I think I still kind of try to figure out what it is too, in the sense of me making this film is also I talk to my parents more, I talk to my siblings and other people in my family that either live the life and just their struggles, and it made me, I guess, even to backtrack to the other questions, for me, how I dealt with it is also for me trying to understand them, what they went through. And I don't think I'll ever will understand them fully, what they went through. I'll never fully feel it. But I can try, through making films and talking to them, talking to other people, watching more films, being here. I think that's the best way for me to, deal with it and also, bring a voice to the community.
Thank you. Any questions from the audience? We take both Vietnamese and English. The gentleman in the back first.
Hi there. So both of these were amazing films. Loved it so much. I find that like being a Vietnamese, actor, filmmaker, you always find that is in parallel with the community and your family. So I was wondering if, like, after making these films, has your family seen it? How do they feel about it? How's your discourse changed, or has your relationship changed after making this movie? Yeah.
So actually, we premiered the film here for the first time, and I flew my family down, and they all saw it. They're sitting like right here. It definitely brought them back, because back in the day, passing around newspapers wasn't as glamorous for them. There was a lot of very hard things that happened to them, and it brought back a lot of like memories for them too. But they, it was very relatable, because the mom in the movie is clearly inspired by my mom, because she's very sweet and endearing. But and the character Ben is inspired by my siblings and in-laws and stuff that also lived that life. So it's kind of like, it brought them back to like a lot of things they went through, and a lot of people wept during the screening, and they're very touched by it.
As you could probably imagine, my mom doesn't want to talk about it. It seems like part of the right character, But then again, she's wanted me kind of be done with filmmaking for a long time, But my father, he's a different figure, But the film hasn't been kind of a conversation. I wouldn't want people to think my mom is the mom of the movie, But there are definitely things that, that inspired me. Ways that your mom teaches you lessons sometimes. You're not really sure why they did it that way, I had a specific example where I had put my wallet down when I came home from work one day, and then I went back 30 minutes later to get it to go out of the house, and it was gone. And I just asked everyone in the house, do you know where my wallet was? And I just went for 3 days, and I was mentally distracted from everything, because I thought about the money I had in there, the paperwork I had to replace. And then suddenly after 3 days, it was there again. And I said, Mom, do you know why it's here? It wasn't obviously here. I asked you about it. She says, but next time you won't lose your wallet because you won't leave it in a negligent place, right? She's right. I learned that lesson, and I'm paranoid by that, but I don't know, So these things, she's not going to explain herself. Yeah, tough love, different ways of showing someone, something, pushing someone in a pool. I'm not saying that, and then figuring out how to swim, or how to toughen up, Sometimes you gotta see how they fend for themselves. Are they strong enough? But we come from, we're refugees, we I think the Vietnamese spirit is has to overcome odds all the time, And again, those expectations. I would like to have a conversation with my mom, Yeah. Sorry, it wasn't as exciting as it should be, right? There's not the full arc there. Yeah.
The lady in the front. We get back to you.
Hi, I just want to say great films. By the way, that was wonderful. I love how sad Newspapers was, and then changing it up and having Fanti be all suspenseful. I just wanted to ask, what were some challenges that you guys, or what was the most challenging part of making both?
Man, I think, well, what is the most challenging? Well, I'm American born and raised, and going to Vietnam 9 years ago, I didn't really speak Vietnamese then. I really speak Vietnamese now. And to make a feature, I don't know, your first feature, it's basically, how can you come up with $1 million to make your thing? I don't got that kind of money, you know. And going to Vietnam, everyone thinks that, you know, it's different than in other occupations. When you come in with like an American, you know, film school degree, they're like, we don't need you here. You know, like, why are you telling Vietnamese narratives? Like, why are you justified, you know? And you can even see what I made, you know, is kind of a bit weird. You know, this is not how Vietnamese cinema typically is told, you know? But I feel like my conviction in doing something new, you know, and seeing how the Vietnamese industry is evolving, but it needs to have something new, you know? We can't, you know, we're used to, you know, making, you know, at the beginning of our Vietnamese industrial boom is making brand name shirts with 5 different brands on them, you know, just copying things, you know? And I think the biggest thing is trying to convince people, like, we can make original things, you know? And I think that was the biggest thing, and maybe the most difficult thing of getting, that's why it took 9 years, you know? It is pushing people to try to make original narratives instead of being these kind of like half-ass Hollywood things in Vietnamese, you know? Like, for me, convincing people to believe me when I used to speak Vietnamese like a 5-year-old, you know? It's not that convincing to give someone $1 million if they talk like a 5-year-old, you know? And so I think, like, convincing people that, you know, the crazy thing that I've never done before and has no precedent will work as a film, I think that was, for me, it was like the biggest thing. The cultural things that comes with it, you know, shooting in a new country, but I think that's par for the course, you know, but doing something original.
For your information, because of Andy's hard work and his vision, he was awarded the Best New Director.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy. My uncle is also a filmmaker, won the same award 33 years prior.
Oh, that's amazing.
The same award 33 years prior, so, I mean, you don't do it for that, you know, but it's something that my mom would talk about more than the movie, you know, winning something, right?
Let's hear from the newspapers. What are the challenges? Right?
I think one of the biggest challenges I'm gonna bring my cast into this is like weaving a story and creating a connection. Because the 2 actors, they did an amazing job, but they weren't on the screen at the same time. You know, it's like there's really a phone call. So like trying to weave a story and emotions through their acting. Even on the first day, David didn't even have a cat. Yeah. She like disappeared. She didn't really. She had to go do something. But then people had to read lines to him, and through like just figuring out how it should be edited, like all before we shot was all part like a very challenging process because I come from an editing background, a post background, and I already weaved the way I kind of like traded the way it was edited first with the way the actors after we rehearsed to kind of figure out how we could do this and create emotion. I talked to our composer even before we started shooting, so everything was already kind of in post before we started production in terms of like. But that was one of the challenging parts because when we went to post, it was a very tedious and it's a very tedious process too because every little like sound or pausing, who to cut to, who not to cut to was a very big part of decision making during the post process. But I think they can explain more because I think it's even more challenging for them in between.
Kathleen.
Most challenging. You know, it's this year I was fortunate enough to do 3 different shorts that got into BFF. And I think the most challenging would be, you know, all the moms are different. Your mom was, you know, but there's that love there,
Yeah.
right? And every mom that I played, there is that love, but every mom's different, right? Her love was different. My love for David's character is different in this film, and you know, it's to play each mom with their own different kind of love. For me, that was challenging, because me as mom, you know, I have my own way of loving my daughter, right? But you know, in each character, yeah, they're all moms, but that love is different. And you know, all you moms out there, you know what I'm talking about. And so that was the challenge for me.
Yeah, the challenge for me doing this film, aside from like, you know, just the technical difficulties of like, you know, having not being in the same room or anything, but just like the character and the situation itself. This was the first film I did out of the 3 at BFF as well, and I was still figuring myself out as a performer and what I wanted to bring to the character, how much of myself I wanted to bring, and how much of the character to take home with me. And we rehearsed a lot before shooting, so I was with Ben like for a pretty good amount of time. And so going home and like after shooting and just like still feeling those negative feelings or just like the grief and like all of that, I just took it all with me because I stayed in that state for so long. So that, I think, looking back was probably the most difficult thing, and then like learning when to let it go and how to let it go, and now how not to go, so like not bring it home with me in the next projects, and how to have fun with it. So yeah, it was a challenge, but I learned from it a lot. Yeah, I learned from this whole experience as an actor. I learned how I wanted to approach my craft in the future.
Before we take the next question, I would like to ask Kathleen a personal question. I've known her for so long, and I've always been mesmerized at your singing, and I'm so amazed at your acting. So the two, how should I say, the two careers, how do they complement or compete with one another?
And Derek, I've known you for a while, and you're moderating. That surprised me today. It's like I'm moderating newspapers and Fanti. Oh, okay. How are they different? Are they that different? I mean, you know, you're with singing, you're on stage. Oh, singing is a lot easier in the sense where I go up there, I do my thing, and then it's like a 3-4 hour gig, and then you're done, right? And it's always a happy thing, and it's always a fun thing. But with the acting part, and Derek, it's more, you got to get into your character. That's the hard part. Just like David says, each character is played differently, and I think with me, acting is actually a lot harder. It takes more time. You're on set for like 12 hours. But they both have that sense where it's for the audience. Yeah, so I'm a ham, you know, so being on stage and doing my singing gig and being on set for filming it, I enjoy both very, very much. Yeah.
Thank you. Next question with the lady in the mask.
Derek, for your record, we have 5 minutes left.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Nina. I have 2 questions. One is going to be for Kekli later, but right now I just wanted to ask a question for all of y'all. I see, so many amazing parallels between newspapers and Fanti. Ben reminds me of my younger brother and how sometimes dogged and narrow-minded he is in trying to support the family and trying to succeed financially. And you know, the love that he has for his mother versus this more intense, dark, but all too familiar bond that Yoon has with her mother. So I really appreciate you bringing that to the screen. That's what we need more of, you know? My question is about, you know, the purpose that we have as children of immigrants and refugees. I'm thinking a lot about, you know, how do we really understand as children of immigrants and refugees to dream independently? Or are our dreams continually going to be tied to our parents? And in other words, it's like, you know, anh chị có đồng ý là ba mẹ của mình cuối cùng là thay thế hay là quyết định cái ước mơ của mình không?
Can
Try to
you?
answer in Vietnamese then.
No, I can't do that.
English is fine.
I think that in terms of, especially about making work regarding anything Viet-centric, I think it's always going to be tied to my parents. my parents are gonna be with me forever, and I kind of noticed that with a lot of the films, Vietnamese films, there's always like a parent-child thing, and I think it's because of like sometimes the generational gap that we thrive to really try to understand who they are, and I think deep down part of our dreams is also wishing that we could fully understand everything about our parents and what we went through, but we never will. But then I think chasing that makes us feel more fulfilled, at least for me. And I think even if I'll never reach it, I think me making this film, it's definitely not gonna be the last. It's just making me, it's fulfilling something, and I realize it after I finished making it and bringing this more of a Vietnamese community together, even amongst this project alone. It really made me realize how important it is, and it's not just for my parents, but it's for like all our parents in a sense.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm the right person to answer, but I think that I'm not a parent, but I think that we're haunted by what you mentioned as children, but I don't necessarily think that the parents think in that context. They're just trying to make sure that we're all right, and sometimes they feel like their role is to help you be even better than you think that you can be, and not just settle for something that's too easy. And I think that's even more apparent with the younger generation now. They're just worried about their kids. I mean, I think that's a mom's full-time job, is just to worry for their children all the time, in every context, to make sure that they're okay. I think I think every parent kind of wants their child to achieve a dream too, but they also don't want their child to be working in the film industry for 20 years and then not have a full-time job, and live paycheck to paycheck. They have a right to be worried. Yes, I want you to have your dream. I'm sure that, I just being my mom's, side, I think that they just, if the dream doesn't work out, and then what? I think I understand that, and they just want their kid at the end of the day to be happy and to be sustainable when they're gone, Maybe does that answer?
Thank you for sharing your experiences with us. We have a lot more questions as you see hands raised, but unfortunately we're running out of time. So one more time, we would like to thank David, Kathleen, Vu, and Andy, especially Andy coming from Florida, surviving the storms. And last but not least, thank you all for coming, for enjoying the films.